Well, good morning, guys, and welcome to the show. Fernando.
Welcome to the show.
How you doing?
Oh, wonderful. I'm just, dressing up the car.
Dressing it up? Was it going out on a party?
That's right.
Well, as you can see from that, we're working on a Jeep JL today. And going through our backlog, we noticed we really haven't done a lot of videos on JLs. We do a ton of Jeeps, we know that, but not any specific ones on JL. And today, we have a great Jeep to do a video on. Let's take a look at what we're going to be putting in this thing. The first pieces we're going to need are speaker brackets. For that, we'll be using the Maestro rear speaker adapters, the front speaker pods, and their new amp rack for underneath the seat. Integration wise, we're going to be using a DSR1. We're going to be putting in a Rockford 5-channel M2 marine amplifier. Speakers, we're going to be using the Power T2 6.5-inch components for the front and the T1 coaxials for the rear. This kid loves bass, so he's getting two P2s in a Rhino line ported enclosure with some speaker grills in the back. And that's the setup for this Jeep. We'll go through each product individually as we work our way through the video. Let's hop into the Jeep and see what it comes with to know what we are going to be replacing. Speaker locations in the JL, mid-range here in the top of the dash, and a mid-bass here in the bottom. I say mid-bass, it's a 4-inch, it's not a 6.5. For the radio, this one has the smaller screen, but that's okay. The DSR1 will integrate in with it, and they really want to keep the factory look in the dash because it's a Jeep. It's a kid and he's probably going to be taking the doors off, so they don't want really anything to stand out. The rear is going to be a little different. Maestro speaker pods, you do remove these and the speaker gets flush mounted onto the outside. Inside of the factory though, it has a 4 and a 3, so in this there's 4 4s and 4 3.5s. In the Alpine system there'd be a sub back here, but this is not the Alpine system. And that's really it. It's not all that exciting as far as what the factory provides you with. That's why these are so popular to update. However, unlike the predecessor, the JK, which was awesome to work on, the JL, not so much. There's actually a lot of work that goes into getting those speaker pods out, getting that radio out, and that's where we're gonna start. We just need to remove a ton of the front dash. Let's hop in the car, and we'll kind of walk you through the steps it takes to get that done. The first place to start in this, believe it or not, I mean, we have to get the radio out, but we also get these two pods out. But you have to start in the middle of the dash first, which is removing the main start air conditioning controls here. Plastic panel tool, and there's just clips all along here. Pull it forward, unplug it. You're gonna need to get the knee buster off at some point. Might as well get it off now. It's just clips that hold it in place. There's 2 screws located down here. They're 7s to get this off. The radio comes out with 4 7s located at the corner. There's also a 5th one here, which is for this top trim piece if you need to remove that. The oh crap bar in front of you has to come off. There's a 10mm located here, and then there's this cool little triangle panel on this side that needs to come off. On this piece there's 1 clip and then 2 hinges, so make sure when you go it off you come from the triangle and pry it forward. This is like a giant screw that holds this thing in place because there again it's made to be held onto. Next, remove the glove box. There's a little push up here at the top. Roll it down some and remove it. Why does everybody break this? Now this one was already broken, but there's this little control arm here. There's a small little gear and a receiver. I don't know why everyone just always manages to break it. It just slides in, it all just goes back together. So even if you pull it out, it's not like it's the end of the world. But there's a hinge that attaches to the side of this glove box that allows you to get that out. On the side of the dash, on both sides, on this side and on that side, there's a plastic side panel, pry tool. All you have to do is get in there to remove that. On the driver's side, there's a bunch of 7mm screws located all around the bottom here. You can start removing those, as well as on the passenger side, below the glove box, underneath the side. All these screws are going to need to come out. There's screws all along this area. You're going to need a 90 to get those out. There's a real pain in the butt one located down here in the corner on both sides that you're not going to be able to use a drill to get it at it. You're going to need some form of a wrench. Now, believe it or not, that's the easy part. Next, it's going to get a little bit more complicated on both sides. Going back to the radio for a second though, once these 4 screws are out, you can pull the radio out and unplug the harnesses. The nice thing about the harnesses is they are color coded to where they're going to go on the radio, so if you forget, don't worry about it, they'll match. The next step is to remove both of these silver areas here. You don't necessarily have to remove this one all the way, you just have to loosen it up. There's an airbag behind it, but the gauge cluster is in fact going to come out. This does now have to come off. To get this off, there's just clips all along once you remove that one screw. The sides are the trickiest part, but just pull forward with it and you'll get it out. We could see somebody has actually already had this dash apart because some of the clips are missing. There should be a clip located on this end and one on the other end, and there's metal clips that all these metal clips should be here, but we're missing 2 of them on this side. So this has already been out of this car. But if you're doing it for the first time, these little clips on the end are plastic. They do like to just go shooting, so we'll be putting ours into place when we're done. We stock them for the simple reason that they like to go flying. Across the top of the dash here, we need to remove all those 7s. Next, carefully pry that out. With that removed, we have to remove this side piece of the dash. There's 2 screws located behind the panel we just removed that need to come out. Keep in mind, you still need to remove all of these screws. The steering wheel has a bracket around it that Fernando just pulled out, and there's another screw located behind that. Now, the steering wheel bracket does not need to be removed, it just needs to be pulled out of place. Once that's done, the whole piece will fall right off. This is the one screw that is a pain to get to, which is located on the bottom of the dash here. To get to that screw, you do need to remove the kick panel harness cover that you use to remove the doors. The headlight has a safety lock on it, which is a little red button that you pull back. You can remove the panel from the car. If you removed all the screws located across the bottom like we instructed, that will mean you removed the bottom screw that holds this in place. If you removed all the screws on this side, there is one hidden screw right here that you have to remove. If you've gotten all those, at this point, there's just one little screw located here that you have to remove in order to get the bracket out. You can reach behind and disconnect the speaker. There may also be a body control module mounted to the back of the bracket. With the bracket now floating in the dash, this bar here is restricting it from coming down. You need to switch to an 8mm and unscrew this side here, and then these have 10s. There's a 10 located here, and there's a 10 located there. That pulled down, a little bit of wiggling and tugging, twisting, yanking, and that pod will come out. On the back is a body control module. Make sure you unplug that. Don't forget to reinstall that and plug that back in. If you get done and your car doesn't start, that's why. And there is the pod for the driver's side. Let's head over to the passenger side and we'll get that one out. When we were talking about on the other side removing the panel that covers the harness, you just need to remove the panel so that you can free up the dash. You have to move on to removing, or loosening up, I should say, this side. And how you start doing that is removing this panel here first. That's going to be held in by those same wonderful clips that the rest of the dash is held together with. There's a little magic clip right here that you have to push these in to get this out, and as you can see what we were talking about from the dash piece, see how these clips fell out, and there's one located there in the dash. When we go to get this out, we'll be careful so that we can retain that piece. If this is your first time taking a Jeep apart, you can buy these off Amazon, and it's probably a good idea to get a couple of them, because no matter how hard you try, they're made to pop off, and they love to pop off. As you can see, Fernando is removing all the screws located around this panel. Do the same, and then there's 2 more 13s that we need to remove in order to pull this forward. With those screws out, kind of reach up in the glove box, give a little push and pull. Take some time on this one. It's a heavy piece. Now we can reach in there and grab that blue clip. There it is. To prevent scratching the dash, because there are some metal pieces behind there, it is an airbag. A towel or a rag or something up in there. Tuck it up in there good enough so that you can still get to everything you need to. Don't pull it too hard because the wire and the clip, you do not want to break them. You don't need to disconnect it, you just need to get it loose. Behind the airbag is a screw. Make sure you remove that. And of course remove all the screws along here. This guy right here, where my finger is, this hole is where that side screw is, the one that you need to remove for the pod. And then there's another screw located up underneath the airbag. With those screws out, you can now pull the corner of this dash up. There's 2 screws you need to remove, one at the top and one at the bottom. Reach into the glove box, unplug the speaker, and now you're going to slide it out through the glove box hole. Yay! The last thing we need to remove on this dash is the top speaker grill covers, and those are just gonna pop up using those same joyful plastic clips. There's 4 clips that hold it. Just kind of work your way around slowly. And to get that speaker out, there is 2 7mm holding it in place. You can use a right angle drill extension to get those out. Now in this car, because it's not an Alpine system, the wires are all connected, meaning there's only 4 outputs from the radio and all 8 speakers are powered off of in pairs. If this is an Alpine system, then all 8 speakers are gonna have wires going to them. They'll be on their own individual channels. Unplug the speaker, remove it out of the dash, and you're all set. Let's head over to the bench and take a look at the pods that we're gonna be using to replace these, as well as take a look at the speakers that we're gonna be putting in. This is the factory driver's side pod. That's that top screw, bottom screw, the screw on the side that you have to remove, and the body control module. Inside of it is the 4 we keep talking about. It's a 3-hole 4. It's actually mid-bass. It sounds pretty good. So trying to find an aftermarket 4-inch that performs like this, we haven't done it yet. That means we're just going to say, okay, no. And we're gonna use these. These are the Maestro JP1014. It comes with factory speaker plugs, as well as 2 pods, and a lengthy instruction to kind of walk you through the process that we just showed you to get that dash apart. So if you were following along, you're like, wait, what? The instructions here will probably help you a little better. Grabbing the driver's side pod, we can compare that to our factory pod. Same locations as far as screws go. And then on the back side of this, you'll notice there's 3 added screw points located along here. And these are so you can remove this module and attach it onto the back of that. You'll also notice these holes here. These are not ports. They're so that you can unplug this factory cable out of the box, put it in here, and then plug this into what would normally be on the other side of that. It comes with the passenger's pod as well. One of the things we like to do to this box, because it is very plasticky, is cover it in sound treatment. And there's 2 ways you can do it. You can do it on the outside, you can do it from the inside. And we do a kind of a combination of both. The reason why is that there's all these holes along here for different size speakers depending on what you're installing. And if you don't cover those, well, you're gonna get air leaks. And it's gonna whistle and go in the dash, and it's audible. I'm gonna get this over to Fernando so that he could start the process of adding the sound treatment to this box. Let's take a look at the speakers we're gonna install in these. These are the Rockford Power Series 6.5s, model number T2652-S. When you open them up, comes with the instruction manual. Very helpful instruction manual, by the way. Definitely thumb through this and take a look at what is inside. It does an explanation of all the bits and pieces that this speaker set comes with. You'll notice right here on the top, we have the big passive crossovers. One of the unique features about these passive crossovers is they are biampable. They have attenuation for the tweeter, 0 plus or minus 2, and they have on-axis, off-axis switch depending on where the tweeter is going to go. And there again, if you'd like to know more about that, check the owner's manual. 2 of those. 2 of the metal tweeters that this kit comes with. These are aggressive speakers, guys. There's some tweeter brackets in it as well. We're going to use some of these for the pieces we're going to make to go up into the dash. Pull it out. Mid-bass. And this is the big guy here. Stamped steel basket, gigantic magnet on the back. This thing is huge. These are heavy. We have a metal pole piece here in the center. Cone is made out of a resin, butyl rubber surround. It has the unique Rockford shape to it that they are known for. These are just big bad boy speakers. Power handling these is like 200 watt, 4 ohm set. We love these things for Jeeps. If you're gonna be rocking them with the doors off, the top off, whatever, these have no problem getting up in your face and reminding you that you have a badass stereo in your car. The one caveat to this is that they do have these big crossovers, which there's no place to put these up in the dash. They're gonna have to go down by the amplifier, which means we are going to be running wires up to the tweeters. It just happens. One last thing, these speakers do come with grills, which can be really helpful for a lot of installations, specifically in the back when we do the T1s. We are gonna need a grill to cover that. The nice thing about these grills is they do have screw locations that come through the front, as opposed to something that twists on or uses some form of butyl to hold in place. Anytime you mount anything like that upside down, you run the risk of the grill constantly falling off. You're not gonna experience that with the Power Series line. This is the driver's side pod, all set and ready to get its speaker put into it. As you just watched Fernando painstakingly put sound treatment all inside of this housing, making sure to cover up all of these holes. He put all the sound treatment along the inside. Because this is the driver's side, it has the module that attached to the back. One thing you do have to keep in mind, it comes with these long 7mm screws. They're too long, they will poke through the housing. Switch it out for something that is more like a 1/2 inch to attach. He removed the factory speaker plug and easily plugged it back into here so that we can reuse it on our new speaker. This pod is made for a 6 and a 6.5. When we first took a look at it, it had these little brackets on the inside. They are removable, and he has removed them because the Rockford that we are using is a much bigger speaker. This is a true 6.5. This pod will work on a 6 or a 6.5. One of the nice things about the Rockford is it does have foam on the back of it. If your speaker does not have foam on the back of it, make sure you put a foam gasket around here so that you don't get air leakage. You will get air leakage if you don't put some kind of a gasket on this. Now he can just reattach this, and we'll take a look at it with the speaker done. This guy is ready to go into the car. One of the cool things about these Rockford speakers is how many screw holes they have. Fernando, being the excessive person he is, if you give him 8 screw locations, he's gonna put 8 screws in it. This guy is mounted in there so well, it's really awesome. One thing to keep in mind when you're picking the speakers for these Jeep pods is how thick the speaker is. As you can see, this thing comes out a good 3/8 of an inch. And where that is going to come into play is on the passenger side. There is going to be some work we're going to need to do into the passenger side of the car in order to get these things to get in there nice and snugly and not worry about it getting damaged. But when we get to that side of the car, we'll show you what we mean, and Fernando will show you what you need to do to remedy that so that it goes in there nice and safe. The next thing I need to get ready for Fernando is the tweeters to go up in the top of the dash. This little guy here is what comes from the factory, and this is what most people complain about, is these things sound very lifeless. And there's some solutions for that, which we do actually have a video out, and that's one of the easiest upgrades you can do to your Jeep or Gladiator to make sound better, and that is just swap these out for a different set of speakers that actually has a tweeter. These are also 8 ohm, so by putting just a 4 ohm speaker in there, it comes alive and sounds a lot better. That's not what we're going to be doing in this one. We're going to be replacing it with these loud tweeters here. These are the T2 TS's that come in the set. One of the nice things about this tweeter though is you can actually buy it as a standalone if you want. In that parts bag that we looked at when we unboxed the speakers, it has a bunch of cool stuff in it. One is this little angle mount here. We're not going to need that. We need these two guys here. This is designed to mount underneath, and this is designed to mount on on the top. And what it does is it sandwiches into the mount that you're gonna make. There's a bag of screws that screws through here into this bolt on the back, makes it nice and tight. The other thing you need is one of these two guys here. One is brushed, one is shiny, and this will click over the top here to finish locking the tweeter into this mount. We need this piece of plastic here though in order to do that. And there's a couple different ways you can do it depending on what you have access to. There is a manufacturer that makes this that you can just buy this plastic and put the tweeter in. One of them is like the worst idea ever, but unfortunately we see it a lot, and that is where somebody just removes this speaker from the center here, glues the tweeter down into it, and puts it back into the car. The most popular way to do this is just make a new bracket, and for that either a 1/4 or 1/8 inch plastic cutting board, something like that, and a router. You can make a bracket for that. This is a scrap piece of 1/4 inch blown PVC and some really short screws. Attach it onto it just like this so you can hold it and it won't fall off. Next thing you're going to need is a router and some form of a flush trim bit. We get these from Mobile Solutions. This is their Mac Daddy 4 bearing version. A double bearing would be fine, but you do need something that is more than one bearing because there is a gap here that you're going to need to make sure that you hit. Let's go over to the router and I'll show you the next step. Flush trim bit is mounted into our router table. First thing you need to do anytime using a router table is adjust the height. This has the 4 bearing in it, which just makes my life a little bit easier. Lock it into place. And just like that, we have a mount that we can use. You don't have a big expensive router table like this. Let's just say you might have one of these cool battery operated routers. These things are awesome. Mobile Solutions does offer 2 new mounts for those routers. This is the X router. This has a lot of neat things you can do with it. One of them is it is the exact same size as this piece here, so it can sit inside of a table and you can have yourself a router station. It can also be used like this. This is the mini animal. It has side pieces here that come off. You can make it sit just like this and router these out. Either one of these two would be an awesome addition, and they're relatively inexpensive. That means you can get into something like this and have a awesome router table, but be battery operated that you can take anywhere you want. Let's head back over to the bench. We'll take a closer look at what we just made. Remove the 2 screws. And here is our bracket. These are the 2 screw holes that you're gonna need to mount it into the car, obviously because they were these screw holes. Drill these a little bit bigger. The other thing we need to do is find out where our center is, lining up with the 2 screw holes. We can draw a line across, grab a tape measure, and that will allow us to find the center. We can then drill a pilot hole and or go right to a hole saw and make the size that we need. This is an awesome way to make a tweeter bracket for these cars. However, we have a laser. That means we're going to use that instead. We have a couple videos where we show you how we get to this step, bringing this speaker into the laptop. We use a flatbed scanner. We scan this in to our software, which gets us the image of the speaker, and then we can trace the speaker, and we have it. We never have to trace the speaker again, and all we have to do is change the hole size here to accommodate whatever tweeter we're gonna put into it. We can also add logos like this that say Jeep or 5-star. Once we get to this step, we can export that out to our laser. For this, we'll be using black 1/8 inch acrylic. It has a paper texture on top to keep it from getting burnt while it's in the laser. Slide that into place. For those of you curious, this is the Glowforge Plus. This will come up on our computer showing us what this is going to look like. Press the print button here. Now we keep a piece of 1/2 inch over the top of this just in case anything falls on top of it because it's glass underneath it. We don't want it to break. When it's time to print, we simply just slide it out of the way so that we can see what's going on. Our little power light lights up. We hit go and it makes some noise. Now this whole process is going to take somewhere around 3 minutes to do. And when it quiets down, that lets me know that the fun is over and I can get to my product. That gets me these 2 guys right here. If you have a laser, make sure you grab one of the rings. You're gonna need that for the next step. Let's take a look at final assembly. With a piece of acrylic, if it has a piece of paper over it like this, take your piece of this and just dig into it. Don't use a knife, don't sit here with your finger. It's a waste of time. Remove it. Little pieces like this, just use that. this acrylic is not going to scratch the other acrylic, unlike if you use a knife or anything else. Do the same on the back, and you can be aggressive, man. I've you know, you dig into this stuff. We have our two brackets, put them on top of one another, they're identical. If we were to drill the hole inside of this, the next step would be the exact same, and that is mounting this piece of it into here. Now you may not have a set of Rockford tweeters, you may have something else. If it's got a speaker cup or anything like that that drops into place, basically the same type of installation. This is our top piece here that goes in like such. Bottom piece comes in the bottom. A couple different length screws. Tighten that up, and now we have our mount. Fish the tweeter through on the Rockford, and most tweeters are going to have a specific way that they go into their mount. Make sure you figure that out before you just sit here and push for hours trying to get it in. Some will push, some will go in and lock. These push into place. I picked the brushed top because it's not shiny, not that you'll see them, and then this one just snaps on over. This guy's done. This can get into the car. Now, you have two different ways you can achieve this. Now, because this is not an Alpine system, and we told you that the mid-range and the tweeter share the same wire, we are going to need to run our own wires up to those tweeters because we're going with these passive crossovers. And even if we were going to go active, we'd still need to run wires up to those tweeters. We like to use barrel connectors on our removable ends here. This is how we like to dress up our speakers that are going to go into the dash. We start with the exterior Tessa tape. We put a little piece of shrink wrap over the last winding of the tape. Okay. After attaching them, put a little piece of red and black shrink wrap, and that gives us our finished tweeter. On the passenger side, where Fernando has his hands, are those waffle pattern that you see there. They stick out between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch. That gets in the way of our speaker. We need to remove that. There's a couple different ways you can do it. All of them take time. This is not something you're going to be doing in a hurry. You can use a grinder, you can use a knife, you could sit there with a pair of pliers and remove each one. Either way, go slow, take your time to get them off. Fernando uses a combination of circular sander as well as a knife to get those out. With the sanding and cutting all done, we can now test to make sure that our speaker does not hit. Fernando has already slid the unit into place and put the top and bottom screws in. He has not put the side screw in. And we also make an 1/8 inch spacer that is designed to go right there on those two screws to add a little bit more room to lift out the bracket. It's an 1/8 inch, so it's not noticeable once the whole thing goes back into place. You can use a couple washers. As you can see there, how close it is to that speaker. But all snapped into place. You want to make sure there's a gap between the surround and that piece there, because the speaker moves, and you don't want it to move and hit, because then you'll just blow the speaker eventually. Does that work for you, Fernando?
It works perfectly.
You can see it from all sides?
Yeah, everything is good.
Now that we have that test fit and ready, Fernando can get all those screws that we took out of this side of the Jeep all put back in place, and we can put the airbag back in. We won't need to be over here for anything else. If you're going to be doing an amplifier underneath the passenger seat, you may want to wait until the very end before you put this side back together. That's entirely up to you. Everything we're going to be doing is going underneath this seat so we can complete that task. We were talking about when we run the tweeters, we're going to have to run our own wires to them because we're mounting the crossovers for them underneath the seat. I like to bring everything to a central location, which is in the dash here. Fernando has made up a nice braided wire, put some flex loom over it with some heat shrink, and then he added in the second set of bullet connectors. Drop it into place, replace the two 7mm screws, and you'll end up with this guy right here looking all sexy. And sadly, no one will ever see it.
But it looks good.
It does look good. The reason why I like to bring all my wires up into here as a central location is I can just bring my 6 wires, my RCAs and everything to a central spot and make connections there, so I know where everything is at. That way I don't have to chase that I put a connection connection over here? Did I put a connection over there? Is it underneath? You know, it's just thinking the whole process out. If this is where my other wires are gonna be, then I wanna make all connections in the same location.
It's time for the rear speakers. I have a 5mm Allen screw driver. Remove the 4 screws. Remove the 4" and the 3.5. This is a T20. It's a rubber grommet that it crossed to the 3.5. Just unplug it and bring it to the other side. And the reason why is because we're going to cut this and we don't want to damage any wiring. Next, remove the 4 screws holding the port. These ones are T30. And the reason why you have to remove it is because it's easier when you're going to cut it for your template.
For the overhead speaker bar, we are going to be using these set of brackets here. We keep saying Jeep, and what we really mean is Wrangler. However, these will also work for the Gladiator. The part number on these are the JP1015s, and they are the overhead speaker adapters. Let's open it up and take a look at them. The first thing you'll find is the instruction manual. It's in color. Tells you all the things you need to know about how to install these. Now it does show you to remove it, and some of you guys are going to want to remove it, but you really don't have to if you're careful, and we'll tell you what we mean by that once we get into the car and show you how to do it. Speaker bracket adapters. There's 3 bags of screws. 2 of them are coarse screws, and you'll find a short and a long, and then one of them is fine thread. The 2 brackets, there's a right and a left. If you flip it over, you'll see this area here. If you want to do a set of components back there, you can, and it gives you the center location for your hole saw in order to make a tweeter mount in this area. They are countersunk a bit, and that Rockford grill fits in there really nice. You can see it kind of flushes up inside of it, and there are tons of holes located on here for different screws, so make sure you pick the right bag of screws in the instructions to put in the right location. It comes in bubble wrap to prevent any scratches. There's a piece of polyfill underneath it, and then there are 2 metal brackets. Now on one side of the metal bracket there is foam. This is the side that is going to go up into the pod, and the other side it's just powder coating. Tons of holes located on here. There again, lots of screws to do this. One of the things that you should know about this is not going to just go in and everything is going to be fine and dandy. You do have to do cutting. You are going to have to remove a good portion of the area where that 4 and the 3 are to make this work. That means this will never go back to factory. That's something to keep in mind when deciding to do this type of install. This will never go back. There is a right and left and another piece of batting, as it were, for this. These are going to go up inside, you know, when you're done. It also acts really nice as a safety blanket to keep the 2 pieces separated. Let's take a look at the speakers that are going to go inside of this. These are the Rockford Fosgate Power T1650s coaxials. Instruction manual. This is a big boy speaker. As you can see, big magnet, just heavy grill. It has the bridge tweeter. They make 2 versions of this speaker. This is the 6.5. They also make a 6-inch version where there's a tweeter mounted into the center. Both of them will fit into the Jeep. The grill for this is specific to this because of the bridge for the tweeter here. It doesn't poke through. One of the nice things about this is sand and dirt and stuff like that. You don't have to worry about it getting up behind here. It has 150 watt power handling. It has the same exact cone as the T2. Butyl rubber surround. It just has this mounting structure, which is a little bit different than the other Rockfords. It makes it a little bit easier to mount into locations. Tweeter wise, has that same metal tweeter that comes with the T2, so it matches up really well. It's a really awesome dynamic speaker. They pair together really nice, and that's why we like to do these in the Jeeps. Now we've taken a look at all these parts, let's join Fernando in the Jeep, and he can show us how we get it prepped and ready to put our Metro brackets up inside of it.
Grab your metal template. They give you the base, 4 screws on the outside. Just hold it. I use a Sharpie with an ultra fine point so I can get into the small holes. And now we're gonna start tracing where are we going to cut. We only going to cut the 6.5 because that's what we put it on. For this one, we're gonna use the rotosip. Have to be careful on the front of the car in this part right here because it goes close. You don't want to poke a hole. So I like to start in the back. This is the part that you have to be careful. I like to go sometimes 2 times because it's plastic, and when you're cutting something, sometimes it melts together. Just be careful. This is the part that you cut into. Now you have to be careful, like I say. I'm gonna show you right here. Why? Because this part right here, if you see, but you don't have to go deep into it because this one goes to the outside. Now we can drill our holes to mount our bracket. Sometimes I like to grab the instruction manual just to have a reference where are gonna be my holes for the screws. And for the holes, I like to use a 3/32 drill bit. Like I say, in this one, be careful on this side. For mounting the bracket, we're gonna have the short coarse head screws. Now it's time for the cover. Grab your T20. I'm using the 4 factory screw holes. It's 2 more on the side. The 3rd bag of screws is to mount the speaker, but we have to test fit it first. Yeah, that's perfect. So the speaker fits. The wire I need to hook it up my new speaker, it's the one of the 4-inch, and I grab the second one and put some zip ties so it doesn't rattle. Plug in the harness. Make sure it's all the way back. Rockford actually provide us with the hex screws that looks more like a factory, so I'm going to use those. The only downside on the plug is they give you just a regular positive and negative. Rockford, it's a different size on the negative, so I'm just gonna change the speaker terminals for that. The different size is only on the negative. Now that my speaker is connected, I'm going to use the polyfill the Metra give us. Kind of cover the plug so when it's inside it doesn't rattle. The first screws that you have to put, either the top or the bottom, left or right. I like to start with one of those. And the reason why is because the corners are gonna hold the grill. So top, bottom, grab our grill. Now don't press it, just hold it. And that's it. We have our rear speaker mounted, hex screws on the speaker side, same on the outside. To the next one.
This is the Rockford M2 750 watt 5-channel marine amplifier. We do a lot of Jeeps, we've done a lot of Jeeps, and we like to find things that are repetitive, meaning it fits, it works, it does exactly what it's supposed to do. This is one of those things. This guy fits, it ticks all the boxes. It's marine, which means if you're taking the doors off, running it with the top off, or anything like that, it can take some moisture. It's not going to be affected. And that is important when dealing with something like this that's a car, but it's kind of got to be all weather. Let's take a look at this amplifier. All Rockford amplifiers come with some form of a burn-in sheet. This one says 800 watts. If you flip it over, you find screws, Allen key, and high-level input plugs. So this will do RCA as well as high level. On the bottom underneath the amplifier, you find the bass knob. It uses a phone style jack. There is a small bag of screws that allows you to take the bass knob apart. To do that, there's 2 screws here on the bottom side. Phillips, you remove those. This whole thing comes apart and it's easy enough to mount into a custom location, which we'll be doing later on in the install. Let's take a closer look at the amplifier. Power rating wise, this is 50 watts by 4 at 4 ohms, 100 watts by 4 at 2 ohms. You can bridge it to 200 by 2 at 4 ohms. And it's 350 watts out to the subwoofer. The crossover is a 12 dB Butterworth, and it has a frequency range of 20 to 25,000, both high pass and low pass. Punch EQ, one of my favorites. 18 dB boost at 45 hertz like it's always been. Looking at the top of the amplifier, we have a bunch of switches and dials and knobs. The first of which is auto remote turn on. If you're going to be using this as a high level input, you can choose to run a remote turn on and or use the DC offset sense to turn the amplifier on. Followed next to that, because the first up is the subwoofer corresponding with its output, you have punch EQ, then the crossover and gain section. It also has an infrasonic or subsonic filter, variable between 15 and 40 hertz, and then the gain. Follow that up with rear, located here, 50 to 250, low pass, off, high pass, adjustable gain. Next to that is your input selection. You can input all 5 channels, 4 channels, or 2 channels. If you pick 4 channels, the 4 RCAs will create the 5th non-fade output for the subwoofer. If you pick 2 channels, you can just put a set of RCAs into the front and it'll populate all the others. Last up is the front output corresponding to this. Same crossover, 50 to 250, low pass, off, and high pass. The gain is adjustable between 1 and 11 volts on all of them. If we flip the amplifier up and look at the side, ground, remote, power, 4 gauge inputs. The rest are going to be a 12 gauge, sub positive, sub negative, rear, left positive, left negative, right positive, right negative, followed up by front in the same order. Bass knob plugs in right here. High level input for sub, front, rear, as well as your RCAs, sub, rear, front. So these all go in the same direction as these, as the same direction of those, so everything makes sense as you're putting the amplifier in. Speaking of putting the amplifier in, how are we going to put this into the car? What pieces do we need? Well, this is the Maestro JP 18 amp -2. This is a 2 amp kit for the JL, Wrangler, or Gladiator. They sell this in a single amp kit, as well as this dual amp kit. The reason why we buy the dual amp kit is because it's the same brackets, whether you do passenger or driver. This is a better deal when it just comes down to it. We get more parts that we can use in multiple vehicles. Let's take a look and see what comes with this dual amp kit, and then you can decide what you want to do. The big difference between the dual and the single is the dual amp kit gives you power wire for going underneath the driver and passenger seat, whereas the single amp kit is made to go underneath the passenger seat only. That's something to think about if you're cool with mounting it underneath the passenger seat. I like to go underneath the driver's seat with the amplifier. When you open it up right on top, you have this cool bracket. This bracket comes with both the single and dual kits. We have 2 different fuses with 2 different color wires. The reason why they do that is driver and passenger, so that you know which one is which. This is made out of metal. This bolts into place using factory bolt locations. Underneath the top piece are the 2 brackets. I really like these 2 brackets. We've been using these a lot lately. What makes them unique is this configuration here. This is the front of the vehicle, this is the back of the vehicle. It rises up like this, so the floor mats and feet and everything still go up underneath it without getting in the way. It's a really cool design. It's designed to sit like this, back of the car, front of the car. And one of the reasons why I like this amplifier so much is it fits on here perfect, just like such. You do need to drill your own holes, but it goes in great. Wires come out towards the bottom, immediately go into the carpeted hump that's right here, so you can zip tie all this up, get a really nice look, which you'll see once we get to that part of the video. But it just sits in here really nice like this. Getting back to what comes in the box, The second mount, identical. Subwoofer 12 gauge speaker wire, one of the 4 gauge power runs, 2 ground wires that are 3 feet long. The second power wire, red, comes with a 6-foot 2-channel RCA, and it comes with a 4-channel RCA 6-foot with the multi-stranded wire already done inside of it. This kit is great if you're going to be doing a 4-channel and a mono block right out of the gate. You can do 2 big amps underneath each seat, or you can combine these two just like this and do what we're doing with a 5-channel installation. It comes with a T-harness. If you're not going to be doing something like a DSR1 or an Amp Pro, they do give you the T-harness. You can plug into a regular high-level to low-level adapter, whatever you want to do there. Then it comes with a bag of installation parts. The bag of installation parts is a really nice bonus. You have ferrules inside of here, fuses, 8-inch zip ties, fork terminals of all different sizes for all different size wires, rubber connections to go over the fork terminals, grommets, shrink wrap, small ferrules along with the big ferrules. So it has everything you could need for your installation. This kit was designed so you could buy this and you'd be all set and ready to go. You wouldn't have to go run into the store to find some extra stuff. It does come with an installation guide. It's color. It walks you through the process for removing the seats, running the wire. They do also have a video up showing you how to do the installation their way, and it gives you kind of a breakout in the very last page of how they would run the wires if they were doing a mono under the passenger seat and a 4-channel under the driver's seat. And like all Metro products, somewhere in the box there's a catch-all container that'll hold all these accessories for me until I need them. Back to the last page in the installation manual. This is going to show us which wire we want for which side of the car. Do we need the white one or do we need the red one? The red one is designed for passenger and the white one is designed for driver. They are different lengths, so knowing this is important. On the front page, it gives us the measurements for the space where your amplifier is going to go if you'd like to know if your amplifier is going to fit. It's 11.5 inches across by 7.5 inches tall. Metro does put all their catalogs online, so if you want to dig deep into this catalog and really see what it can do for you, by all means head over to metroonline.com and check that out. The nice thing is they've saved us the hassle of putting the flex loom on the wires. It's already on and done. That's going to save us some time in the installation. Both of the ground wires are the same length, and it is also covered in the flexi loom. Digging into our parts bag, there's at least a dozen 8-inch zip ties that are standard, and then they give you 5 or 6 with holes in them to screw down if you need to. What I'm looking for is my positive and negative ferrules. And for the rest of the stuff, I'm just gonna put it in a little bin so I can grab it as needed. In there are the smaller ferrules, as well as if your amplifier needs a fork terminal. So you have both inside of here. Fuses that come inside of it are 100 amp. One step we need to do, because these are Rockford amplifiers, you may need to do on some of your installs too. The way the Rockford amplifier is designed, there's really not enough room coming out of the amplifier because they're at an angle to allow for something like this. I need to remove the little plastic parts. Razor knife drops right out. This is what I need. On the end of the power wire, it has this silicone filled shrink wrap, and it's really designed for that ferrule with that to go over the end of it. In this case, it's not gonna work. Very gently cut and remove this piece of shrink wrap. Strip the 4-gauge wire, slide our ferrule into place. It does come with 3 pieces of shrink wrap that say T-spec on them, which are made for going underneath the hood. So when you do something like this to modify the end, you're gonna have to use your own shrink wrap to go over it. 1/2-inch heat shrink should do the trick. Line it up, shrink it down into place, and now we have an end that will work in the Rockford amplifier. We'll do the same thing to our ground wire. If you make a bracket that is universal, it's hard to make something that's gonna have holes for every single thing. In this case, it doesn't. So we have to make our own holes. We have an awl here that we're gonna use to scratch in where we need to drill our holes. And what I've done, because it's at an angle, as you see these here, this is to prop it up flat so it just doesn't continuously slide off. And that has marked our full hole locations. Now we'll mark those areas. Drill our first hole. That is our starter hole. Switching drill bits over to this. This is gonna allow us to drill a threaded hole for an M4 screw. It's got a drill bit tip on it, but I don't like to use that to do all the drilling. I like to pre-drill the hole. That will get us a threaded hole so we can use an M4 Allen head screw to lock the amplifier in place. I'm gonna do that on these 3 other holes. 4 holes are drilled. We have some 1/2 inch long M4s. Test thread them into place. Perfect, they all go in, no cross threading, no anything like that. I don't want to put the amplifier on here yet because even though this has this cool area here and what it's used for, feet and all that stuff, this might have to be the area for the 2 crossovers to go up underneath it. That means I need to go into the car now, pull the bolts for the seat, flip the seat up, and get this underneath it and see if my crossovers will fit underneath here. Join me in the car. Pull the seat bolts out. Jeep uses a Torx to get those out, and they're a monster. So if you have to use a regular ratchet, pack a lunch, you're gonna be there twisting for a while. We use the Milwaukee Impact to get them out way easier. The bracket sits up underneath the seat just like this, slides in from the back side. The wiring is going to just go right into this area here, which is perfect. It's a great fit. That's why I love this combination. Here is our crossovers though. These things are big. What they'll do is they will fit up underneath just like this. We'll be able to attach them to the back side of this and the wiring will just run out because there is a gap here across the front to make that happen. That means I need to take these back over to the bench and make some holes and mount those in. The bracket upside down, we need the wires to go this way, center them up. We'll do the same thing we did when mounting the amplifier. We'll scratch in where we need the holes to be. I like to do one at a time. I'm not gonna do these. I'm gonna get this drilled and mounted and then I'll do this one because it never fails. They always shift just a little bit. But I'm gonna do the exact same process that I did on the front side. I'll drill a pilot hole and then make a provision to put a threaded screw into it. And there we go, our 2 crossovers are mounted and I have the right length screws so they are perfectly flush with this top piece here. They're not going to interfere with our amplifier or anything like that, which makes it perfect. With that being done, I can now screw the amplifier into place and we can start the wiring process. Whew. Done, all screwed together. I know I said let's start the wiring process, but before we start the wiring process, let's get it back in the car and just test fit it one more time. And there it is, test fitting, plenty of room. Everything looks good. We still have room for our feet. If you're never going to take the doors of the top or anything like that, and you'd like something that's black, they also make this amplifier in the regular R2 line. We accidentally called this an R2 instead of the M2. If you want something stealth, but keep in mind that one is not marine rated. Now we can pull this back out, get over there, get some wires into this bad boy. After thinking about how this particular system is going in this car, I decided that using the RCAs and speaker wire that come with the kit wasn't going to be my best option, mainly because it would be fine if it was just front rear sub, but because we have the passive crossovers and we have to run the tweeter wires, the mid-range wires, I didn't want to have to take that whole assembly apart, run 2 extra wires through it, so I decided that we were just going to save it for another install. We will just run our own wire in this particular vehicle. I've went ahead and prepped the wiring for what we're going to be doing, and to give you an overview of that is we have our left and right speaker wire that are going to come out of the amplifier and go into the crossover. We have our left and right rear channels here, as well as our 4 speaker wires for the front. How we do this is we use primary wire. We use the standard colors like white, gray, green, and purple to denote the 4 corners of the car. And then we use a secondary color for ground. In most cases, you're using black is going to be a primary mid-bass in this case, or just denoting front and rear. And then for the tweeter, we use either yellow, red, or orange to let us know that that is a tweeter. So in this case we have white with yellow and gray with yellow. Those are going to attach down here into the crossovers. These 2 wires are going to be jumpers that come out of these front 4 terminals here and then come into the inputs on the tweeter. When using the Rockford and not bi-amping them, your input is tweeter. That will auto-populate the tweeter and mid output of the crossover. I added all the ferrules onto my wire and then I put little pieces of red and black heat shrink on here. Slide those into place. With those in, I'll just keep the same configuration that is going on at the top of the amp underneath at the crossovers. That means this guy here will be my driver and this guy here will be my passenger. Even though that is opposite of what the car is, I want to follow the left and right, what's going on here. If we ever have to service it, it'll make more sense to us down the road. Strip the wire back, get our ferrule on, add a piece of heat shrink, and then just repeat. And that'll get us started with the first wire. I'm going to attach the rest of the crossover wires and then I'll come back and do the ground. That way these aren't just hanging out in my way. Wires are in, zip tied up into place. I also added in the remote turn on and then I tested tape the bundle up. This is going to go up into the dash. One of the things I always forget when doing an amplifier, I don't know why, is the bass knob. While I'm thinking about it, I'm going to just add that into place. The next three pieces that need to be installed in this are the subwoofer wire and the power and ground. We are going to be using the subwoofer wire that came in the kit. It's long enough to do what we need it to do. It does not come with the ferrules installed on the end. You do have to install those if you're going to be using them. Next is the ground, which we already got ready earlier. Then the power. All the wires are just going to be coming forward on this. There's the air conditioner that sits here, and then there's in front of that is the structural railing, and there's a gap in the carpet where the factory wiring runs. These wires are going to come forward and then they're going to go left or right. Power wire is going to go towards the door. There is a factory ground point located right over here next to the amplifier. We'll be using that, so this ground wire is just going to loop up into place and then go to the factory ground. The signal is going to go this way, bass knob is going to go that way, the sub wire is going to go towards the door, and then the last thing to go in place is going to be the RCAs, which are also going to go this way along with the speaker wire. For that, we're just going to be running 3 pairs of 6-foot RCAs, which I'm going to get prepped up and plugged into place right now. To prep the RCAs, we have multicolored heat shrink, gray, white, green, and purple, and we add those to the ends of the RCAs so that we know what channel is going to which, meaning the grays will match the grays, the whites will match the white. It's the standard radio colors. It just slides over and make it a little bit longer on the side that goes into the amplifier, covering the whole RCA end. That gives us just a gray RCA tip. On the end that goes into the radio is a smaller piece. It just needs to be big enough so that when we're looking in the dash, we can see it. And that's it. RCAs are all plugged in, color coded, ready to go. Everything is color coded. Everything has tape. This is taped up to the front, so it'll be able to tuck in and hide in with the factory wiring. The only thing left to do now is to get this bad boy back into the car and start running the wires through the car. Get this power wire out to underneath the hood so Fernando can start on the fuse holder, getting that all mounted into place. I don't want to talk about it, just join me in the car and we'll see what happens. Coming in, the amplifier is in place. I know I kind of fast forward ahead on that. This is that area I was talking about where there's a tunnel for wiring. The factory wiring runs over here. The metal stops like right here. So there's a ton of room for that. And then there's running boards over the side there. So there's plenty of room to run wire along this sill here. There's the ground wire and the speaker wire. There's the factory ground point right there. The wire just loops up, goes right in, piece of cake. Speaker wires run up this way. There is a second area here that has this big air conditioner vent. The RCAs and the bass knob run along that, and then they all come up into the dash. Here are my RCAs, all taped up, so they'll be incognito. You won't notice them because, as you can see, everything else in this dash is covered in tape except for this, which is the GPS tracker, which, let's be honest, yep, easy to see. In this kit comes 2 fuse holders mounted to this bracket. If you get the single amp kit, it comes with 1 fuse holder mounted to the bracket. For this installation, we are only going to need 1 of these fuse holders. If you pop the tops off, they have Torx that they use to screw them into place. It's kind of a T-spec thing, is that they use Torx screws. We're using the white power wire for this, so we'll remove the red one. That'll give us an opportunity to look a little closer at this fuse holder. T-spec, they use Torx screws. They're not an Allen screw. It's one of the things I like about the T-spec product. Also, the screw itself doesn't have a flat end on it. It has a ball end on it, so when it's compressing the wire in my opinion, it does a much better job of not pulling pulling and ripping the wire. It pushes it in nice. When we've removed the wire, it actually looks really good. There is rubber grommets on either end to keep moisture out of the fuse holder, and then the top snaps into place, creates a nice seal all the way around it. It's a really nice simple fuse holder to use in an installation like this. Even though we're not going to be using the other fuse holder, I don't want to leave these two screws out of here. One day we may add in another amp, who knows, or they may want to add in something to this mount because it's a Jeep, and let's be honest, people love adding stuff into Jeeps. So I'll leave these two screws in place. Now I can get these over to Fernando and he can get it bolted into place. The fuse holder is attached in place. One of the things we add is foam underneath these two metal pieces here, simply because metal on metal obviously could get some scratches or something like that as time goes on if they're going to take it out at some point. Plus we don't want it to vibrate or anything. I know it's a Jeep, there's plenty of things in here to vibrate, so we don't want one more thing. Wire comes in, wire goes out, attaches over here to the battery, looking all sexy. And there again, that spot here, if he ever wants to add anything else to it later down the road, he can. For integrating into the factory stair, we're going to be using the Rockford DSR1. This is a joint effort between Rockford and iDataLink Maestro. The two of them will allow us to tell the radio that it is actually a factory premium audio system by reprogramming it and giving us a clean 5-volt, perfectly flat, no bass roll off, no EQ, no nothing, output into the DSR1, which in turn we now have a full DSP that we can do anything we want with. What we need for my data is this piece here, which is the DCH3. This is the harness that is going to attach to the back of the radio. Has the big factory harness right here, and then coming off of it are the speaker wires and a 3-foot cable to run to the DSR1. When you're doing this, you can no longer use the radio power for anything. You have to do a full amplified system at this point, because if you're doing the premium audio system, it doesn't use deck power for anything. It's a preamp level output going into the factory amplifier. When you get a DSR1, the first thing you have to do is plug it into your computer and tell it what it's going to do, whether you're doing it for something like this where we know the car it's going into, or you're going to use it as a standalone. The DSR1 is one of what I like to call the trifecta of doom, in that it could be a standalone DSP that can be high level, it can be low level, or in this case it can be iData. So it's a really cool piece to do that for. There are some limitations to it in the first two configurations, like it's only a 4-channel input, both high level, low level, but for what we're doing it's going to be perfect. A couple other things that's unique about the DSR1 when installing like this is we can actually reprogram some of the factory radio features to do DSR features. So for example, we can use the bass control in the radio to be subwoofer volume. Now we don't have to worry about that in this installation because the amplifier comes with a bass knob, but if we didn't want to mount a bass knob, we could use the DSR1 to control that. This has punch bass built into it. We can program one of the features, such as the subwoofer level, to be punch bass, which is what we're going to do in this installation, so that we can have a boomier sound controlled right there at the head unit. Inside the box is the DSR1. There is some instructions. Basically the instructions are telling you to go off to idatalink.com or maestro.com and download the software to flash this. And then inside the bottom of the box here is an input harness and an output harness, and the USB cable to flash the unit. For this installation we won't be using the input harness because that is attached to the iData harness. There's two harnesses on this end. One is the input harness that you see here, and the other one is the actual data connection that is located on the same side. They both plug into the brain right here. The third piece to this is this set of wires right here. These are the data wires that are going to talk to the car. They're not located behind the radio, they're over behind the glove box. So we'll be plugging into the little module pod that's behind there. First thing I need to do is get this over to the laptop though and tell it what it's going into. When you're done programming the DSR1, it'll ask you if you'd like to open the instruction manual. Of course, click yes, scroll down to your vehicle, and this will walk you through the process of what you need to do to put it into the car. This is indicating here behind the glove box the connection you need to make. And if you page back one, in this section where it says step 5, reprogramming the OEM radio to amplified mode. We're going to follow these instructions to reprogram the radio. For reprogramming the radio though, make sure you're to a point to where you can shut the car up, close the doors, radio, all the buttons are plugged back in. You don't want anything not plugged in when you're doing the reprogramming part, because you don't want an open data bus. As soon as we get everything plugged back in, that'll be the first thing we do. Finding a place for the DSR1 to go in the JL or the Gladiator, basically what you're gonna do is put it where the factory amplifier is. In this case, there is no factory amplifier. However, there is still this bracket here because there's a body control module that clips onto the bottom of this, and it sits right underneath the steering column. Take the bracket out, made a piece of ABS plastic that's like 4 1/4 by 8. This allows me to bolt into it, very similar to what we did with the amp bracket. We tapped in some M5 screws, some M3s through it, and made this nice little mount. This allows us to stagger the RCAs. We can screw them down into place so they're not flopping around in the dash. So come with me now and I'll show you in the car where this is made to be. Behind the glove box, down here on the bottom, there's 2 bus ports. There's a white one with green terminals and there's a green one with white terminals. This is important. We have a white terminal here. That means it's gonna go into the green port. On the cable, there's a black end, and the reason why that's there is if there is no open green terminals, you can unplug one that's existing, plug it into here, and plug that in. These are just big bus bars. We're lucky enough that there's like 5 open in the back and 3 open here in the front. Pick one in the middle, plug that in. That's all we have to do for that installation, other than running this wire over to the DSR1. The DSR1 is going to sit right in this area here, just like this. Gotta get it all figured out. And then there's 2 bolts that go here in the top, 2 bolts that go right here. The RCAs will plug into the back side. This is the data connection for it. Once I get this mounted in place, then we can get the speaker pod back in. It's easier to leave this out until the very end. This is the body control module. This just clicks back up into the bottom here like that. This makes everything nice, mounted, out of the way. Bass knob wire is located right here. Once I get that dash panel on, I'll show you where that's gonna go. At this point, it's just a matter of plugging a few more things in, and then we can head up into the radio and start attaching those wires. And this is what it looks like when it's all put back together. Bolts up in there really nice. The GPS locator is back on top. Underneath, the module plugs back in. With me out of the way, Fernando can come back in here and get the side of this car back together. Let's head up here into the dash. These 2 wires here are the tweeter wires up in the dash, like we showed you earlier. Yellow, white, yellow, gray. So that's yellow, white. This is yellow, gray. Our bundle from the amplifier is here. We taped it all up, so now we'll remove about that much tape. And these are the speaker wires for the rest of the speakers in the car. This is the iData harness in there. Plugs into the factory. This will plug into the back of the radio. I have to get these attached to here and here. One of the things that we do differently, because we're running the remote turn on for no particular reason with the speaker wires, if we were to run it with the RCAs, which we could have, then we would just make the connection there for the remote turn on. But we didn't. We ran it with the speaker wires. That meant, if you'll notice here, there's 2 wires. This is the remote turn on wire because the remote turn on wire is located next to the DSR1. So I ran it with this, taped it into the harness. That gives me the remote turn on wire right here. So we'll make all these connections in the dash, then we can plug the radio back in. Now there's not a lot of room in this dash. However, there is enough room to tuck up all of the wires that we ran. As you can see here, we have the radio plug, we have all the other plugs that are going to attach to it, and everything else just kind of goes up in there off to the left or right side. Not a ton of room though, so that DSR1 is definitely not going up in here. That's why it has the 3-foot extension and can go up underneath the dash there. And since we're looking at the dash, here is the bass knob. This is a nice little area here that it'll fit in, tucked in out of the way, but easily accessible by the driver so he can turn up and down the volume. I have my laptop over in the seat. Start with the emergency brake off. Make sure the turn signal is in the middle position. Turn the car to run. Get the first honk. Left turn signal, second honk. Wait, the radio should reboot twice. Now you're in amplified mode when you hear those 2 honks. Just wait for this to get done, and that's pretty much it. If you want to reverse it and put it back into non-amplified mode, repeat the process, but put on the right turn signal. So just flick this up. There's a couple different horn honks that'll tell you. So you heard the 1 horn honk, you heard a second horn honk, and then you hear 2 horn honks. So you're hoping to get 4 horn honk. If you get 3 horn honks, that's telling you at the very end, so you get 2 and then 3, that's telling you that it's back in regular radio mode. If you get 5 horn honks at the end for a total of 7, that means you screwed it up. I've never gotten a 7. So that's good. You'll be okay. All right, now it's just time to turn it on and make sure everything works. It's that time. Everything is working. We need to do a few tests. One is polarity. Now, being that this is a Chrysler at heart, every speaker should be popping red. That one is. Move up to the next one. All right, we're good there. I'll take it. All right, good. Test the rears. Perfect. Last one. All right, got 2 reds. Great. Which that popping noise is almost as bad as the chime that this key makes. Come into the audio and we want to check balance and fader. All right, so that noise there, that is driver's front. Right behind my head is doing what it needs to do. And that leaves only 1. Perfect. Back in the middle. When we were flashing DSR1, I was telling you guys about selecting special features. This has speed adjust volume, and we've made that punch bass. So when you're on this page here, this is 0 dB or off, and then each time you press one of these, it increases the punch bass, which is really cool. And then the equalizer, you also have the option too of going in and adjusting and also turning off. So you can turn off like bass, mid, treble. You can turn these off or have them do whatever you want. In this case, we've turned off bass. So this is a kid and he just doesn't go in there and turn it all the way up and go crazy on it. It's a good idea?
Yes, of course.
When we started, Fernando took measurements to where the seat was, and he's put them back where it is now. That means we are going to get the RTA in here and launch some software and start doing some tuning. Get this thing to sound the best that it can. Pink noise is playing. Microphone is in place. Shut the door. TMRTA, iPad plugged in. That's gonna be for tuning the DSR1. I like to plug everything in, it's all got power. I'm not a battery guy, I don't rely on batteries. This is what's coming out of the system right now. The subwoofer is turned all the way down. This is what we're gonna have to deal with. There's something here that is yuck, and yeah. Let's get to work. One of the first things you want to do is go into advanced setup on your DSR1, and I like to go to trim level and just turn off each speaker one at a time. That gives me no sound. After that, I go to the time alignment page. When Fernando measures the seat, he also measures for time alignment. In the top right-hand corner of the software for the DSR1 is a tape measure. All you have to do is enter in your measurements. You don't have to do any math, you don't have to do anything like that. It does all of that for you. And make sure you hit return after each number you enter. When you're done, hit enter and then save. That'll do all its math at that point. Here's where you can also, if you need to flip anything 180 degree out of phase. Next page after that is crossovers. Really simple, front rear sub in this case, 80 hertz, 12 or 24 dB, you decide. In the top right hand corner there's a picture of a speaker. You tap that. That'll load up a picture of the car and you can choose which one you want to adjust first. I always go front rear sub, keep it in order. And with those 3 basic setups done, now it's time to hit over to the EQ. Sit back, relax, get yourself a cold drink, put your pink noise on, and just start tuning. I like to start with the passenger side door first, pick which one you like, and move on from there. Done with that. Cleaned it all up, got it looking super sexy. Fernando and I have been actually listening to it for a while, jamming out. And now it's time for you guys to hop in and take a little listen to it. Before we do that, let me show you what happened in the back as far as subwoofer goes, because you guys are always like, what'd you do for a subwoofer? 2 P2s, Rockfords, Rhino lined box, ported grills. This is a kid, he wants this thing to slam, and it slams. Let's take a listen. nice thing about combining amplifiers and woofers together that you know play well. You get great sound out of them. P2s with this amplifier, we've done it in the past, we know how it sounds, and it is a monster amount of bass. Like the side mirrors are rattling, the windshield wipers are bouncing. It's really cool. This kid's gonna love it.
Yes, for sure.
But it does more than bass. Let's listen to some blinding highs. Well, there you go. That's what you got, guys. We hope you enjoyed this JL Jeep installation. Full Rockford. They'll be happy.
He will be so happy, yes, for sure.
Yeah, one of the criteria on this was he's a kid. He wants it to be loud. He wants it to be just, yeah, we've done 2 of their other Jeeps. This is actually the 3rd Jeep we've done for these guys. Yeah. They're a Jeep family. And we tried to do something just a little bit different in each one of the Jeeps, you know, to make it specific for the person that is driving it. I think this kid is just gonna lose his, yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like it.
Well, guys, as I said, I hope you enjoyed this Jeep JL. Fernando.
On to the next one, guys.
You guys have a great night as always. We'll see you later next time.
Bye.
Bye.